Do you want to do it or shall I do it?
What do you want? What? Again, this is Grand Complications, and you're going to animate the title here. I have a big problem with the watch industry. I feel that they became a bit sloppy and comfortable in the past 5 to 10 years.
Too boring, you think?
Too boring, they're not bold enough, they're not daring enough, and I don't like that. This is Grand Complications. I'm Balazs Ferenczi.
I'm Thomas Hendricks, and today we're talking about vintage revivals, the good ones and
the bad ones. And the ugly.
And the ugly ones. Let's start with a huge brand that I think does not get enough credit for doing new stuff. In fact, they get blamed for the opposite, which is Rolex, if you can believe it. Okay, hear me out. So yes, the Datejust of today looks much like the Datejust of the 1950s. Same with the Submariner, same with the GMT, more or less same with the Daytona. But, okay, so we have the 1908, which came out recently, which is essentially a whole new watch. I know it's inspired by the Cellini, but it is definitely far enough away from that. It felt like a new chapter for Rolex, and one that I think they should be exploring more. Also, they came out with their other most recent model, probably the Sky Dweller, let's say.
Yeah.
New, complicated, brand new stuff for Rolex that I think we forget about now because we've had so many more Datejusts and subs and things like that. They are doing new stuff.
Well, they are doing what they're supposed to do. Of course, they should invent and reinvent. I think so for personally, the 1908 is not my thing. I think it's a mix of everything. That's just a personal, preference. I think that what Rolex is doing is like always very, very careful. Very, very, very slow transformation.
Up until recently.
Up until recently, yes. And then since
palm dials, celebration dials, puzzle dials.
Absolutely. Since 2021, they're shifting gears.
Yeah.
But before, there was like very slow transformation.
But to that point, I'd say now they are one of the brands that's actually surprisingly pedal to the floor, pushing things forward.
Yeah, since 3 years.
Yeah, I would say there are other brands that are stuck doing vintage revivals, and this is not limited to just this brand, but I would say Tag Heuer is doing that. And I will say I praise Tag Heuer for doing that because they've done a lot of watches that no one wanted. And then boom, they do a good Carrera. Thank you. They did a great Skipper.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was nice. Yeah.
But at a certain point, does that become like a Paul McCartney problem? In that, like, I went to a Paul McCartney concert and
What did you?
He was like, oh, we're going to play one from the new album. And then you just hear the whole stadium like, oh. No one wants the new stuff.
Yeah,
people want the old stuff, the Beatles stuff. That's one where, I don't know, Tag Heuer has failed at doing new stuff recently, in my opinion. And then it's like, oh, thank God they're going back to the old stuff.
Yeah, and you have many brands like that, as you said. Like they're not the only ones. And I think that is a bit of a problematic thing because, again, you're just too comfortable. You're not daring. You're not trying to do new designs.
Blancpain has been very reliant on vintage revivals.
Longines, Tissot, Certina, you can mention many brands. I mean, I'm not saying they don't have nothing new because they do have new models, but a lot of the stuff, it's just an old catalog, a bit bigger, a bit smaller, a bit thicker, a bit thinner, and then that's it. And of course, they're not the only ones. You have like small brands and maybe even micro brands that actually only capitalize on vintage design.
Yeah, okay, so there are micro brands that are just doing vintage revival stuff, and then there are ones that are doing all new stuff like Treelobe, Ming, for example.
Yeah.
There's certainly adventurous one out there. Speaking of micro brands, there's one I want to mention that has kind of done both. Christopher Ward is a brand that mainly does watches that look like X. They do like
other models.
For example. Yeah, they have like an integrated bracelet kind of thing. They have like divers that are like very reminiscent of other divers, but best watch they've done that like really woke up the industry and woke up a lot of our is the Bell Canto. New thing, a big risk. I think their failure rate for making that watch was absolutely huge as far as getting it just right. And I think that's, of course, why a lot of brands struggle to even open that door is because vintage revivals are easy money.
Absolutely. And I mean, we saw it at Wind Up last year. Especially the purple was my favorite. It's a really cool watch. And you said it right, like Christopher Ward has no history in a sense that they're not a 100-year-old company. They don't have catalogs.
They're forced to innovate.
Exactly. They have no catalog from the 70s. And I think that's quite interesting, not only about them, but similar brands. And you could even mention horlogerie, like micro brand, or not micro brands, like indie brands, I mean, where they are forced to do something new. So they are super innovative.
MB&F, a prime example.
And BNF, but also Resonance, if you think about it.
That's how you make a name for yourself.
HYT,
It's
yes.
not what you did 50 years ago, it's what you're doing next year.
And it's awesome to see that, right? Moser, that all that innovation, all that creative energy that goes into those brands, just a teeny tiny bit of that should go into the big brands as well.
Yeah.
Because they are really, really slow compared to an horlogerie brand.
I want to bring up a brand that we might disagree on.
Okay.
That I think straddles the line between doing old and new, and that's Zenith, particularly with the El Primero.
Okay.
Because they have more classic versions like the Chronomaster, I guess, that are like more true to the 1960s versions. And then they took that and then did the whole Defy line as well. So that, for me, feels like an example of taking DNA and mutating it into something new. Whether or not it works, I don't know. Like, how will we view these watches 5 years from now, for example? But I'm glad they're doing it.
Yeah, you're right. And I think when you look at Zenith and the group, so LVMH, you have Tag Heuer, you mentioned that. We have Zenith, we have Hublot, and we have Bulgari. And they are so very different. Like, all four of those brands.
All pretty forward-thinking now that you mentioned, compared to other watch brand conglomerates.
Yeah, absolutely. But you're right. I mean, they do obviously a lot of vintage-inspired watches because that's their DNA, the El Primero, being the first, or arguably the first, automatic chronograph. But they do new stuff. The new stuff, they just don't resonate with me. But the vintage stuff or the vintage-inspired stuff, I do like. But it's quite interesting, as I said, to see them in the same group as all those other brands, particularly Tag Heuer or Bulgari.
Yeah. Another way to think about this, and this brings in another industry, as we were talking about cars, for example. It's so hard to tell what the future classics are going to be. We were thinking about the new Land Rover Defender. And when I first saw it, I was like, this is a mistake. This should not exist. Why did you mess this up?
Yeah.
And then now I'm warming up to it.
I mean, we talked about this earlier, and I mean, if you follow me, you know my Instagram, I love Defenders. I post about them quite often. So I really love the old one.
You're quick to defend the Defender.
Ooh. Yes, I am. But so I really love the old one. And when I saw the new ones, I'm like, they just look like a discovery. But now that I've seen them more and more, and especially in New York, there's really a lot of them, like a lot of them, city car. I started to kind of like them. So you're absolutely right. That's a great analogy.
So, I mean, that begs the question. I would love to hear comments about this. Like, what are the future classics now that people are not paying enough attention to? What are you snatching up that might be more expensive 5 years from now, for example?
Sleeper watches, you can call them.
Yes, or like, this brand really needs to, like, they have a hit with this watch. Please explore that more.
What do you think about micro brands capitalizing on vintage design? Not horlogerie, but, you know.
I get it as a business model, but I'm not excited about it.
It's an easy way to win a larger audience or you know, push your product out. But we're talking about Nevada, we're talking about Baltic, talking about Yema, and all those brands, which are, I think they're doing good stuff. I really enjoy it. I love most of these brands. But usually when I look at a vintage re-edition, I'm always like, this is really cool, but I love to see the original.
Yeah, I would love to. This is a holdover from when I can afford the real thing. And I think that's a central question here. Like, what future classics are out there that we're not paying attention to? And I would love to hear comments like, what new watches do you think 5 years from now, 10 years from now, we're going to look back and be like, damn it, why didn't we see it? And is it the 1159?
No, it's not.
Let us know in a comment below. This has been Brand Complications with Balazs Ferenczi and Thomas Hendricks. We have more episodes on the way. Stay tuned.